My mother's champagne glass froze midair when my sister announced to our entire Christmas dinner that I was 36 and tragically alone. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I'm 36 years old. It was Christmas Eve at my parents' house in Connecticut, and my younger sister Brooke had leaned across the turkey platter with that particular smile she reserves for public performances. 36 and still flying solo? Wow, the holidays must hit differently when you're the only one without a plus one. Her voice carried perfectly to every corner of the dining room. Every single person at that table laughed. My father's laugh was the loudest, a booming thing that shook the crystal. My mother, still holding her flute of Prosecco for the toast she'd been about to deliver, offered that gentle, knowing smile she's perfected over decades and murmured, "Oh, she's just teasing." I set my drink down on the linen tablecloth. I didn't speak yet. But here's what none of them understood. I hadn't flown back to Connecticut to be the punchline at my family's holiday meal. I'd come home because 10 days earlier, a legal file had landed on my desk with my own signature at the bottom of a contract I had never seen, in handwriting that was absolutely not mine. Welcome to Zarabell Stories. This is where we gather with the women who've spent years smoothing things over, the ones who kept the peace until the cost became too heavy to carry. Pour yourself something warm, settle in, and don't forget to subscribe. You need to understand who I am before I tell you what I did, because the two versions don't align the way my family tells it. I'm an acoustic engineer. I design spaces that hold sound the way a well-made vessel holds water, contained, clear, nothing wasted. Recording studios, concert halls, a pediatric wing in Boston where the monitors hum softer now because I taught the surfaces to absorb the sharp edges. I built my reputation from a folding table and a borrowed calibration tool. And now, organizations fly me across the country to make their quiet spaces sound right. My family knows almost nothing about this in any meaningful way. To them, I'm the daughter who moved away, the one who never produced grandchildren on schedule, the one whose existence serves as entertainment between the yams and the pumpkin pie. I hadn't been back to Hartford in 3 years. I hadn't intended to come this year either. Then Walter, an aging technician who still worked the Vance Acoustics floor and still recalled teaching me to calibrate microphones, called me on a Wednesday and said, very quietly, "Eleanor, they're finalizing a sale on the dampening line. Investors. Big numbers. And your father keeps telling them the patents are clean. All assigned to the company. All in the family." He paused. "But I never saw you sign anything. Did you?" I hadn't. That's when I booked the flight. Not for the ham, not for the toasts, not for the family gathering, for a single clause in a document I needed to see with my own eyes before I let anyone convince me I was overreacting. Because a signature is something small until it's yours. And it's yours until someone decides it belongs to the family too. But all of that was still folded up inside me at the dinner table. And my family had no clue. Brooke was on a roll. My younger sister manages marketing for the firm, which essentially means she's excellent at controlling which version of events people get to hear. "I'm just saying," she continued, spearing a Brussels sprout, "some of us made choices. Some of us built things." Eleanor went off to, what is it again? Soundproofing rooms. More laughter. My father set his fork down and performed the gesture he always makes. The one that used to make me feel special when I was young. He spread his hands like he was delivering a benediction and said, Now, this family built something real. 45 years of the Vance name on that building." He looked around, warm, certain, and whatever any of us does, we do it for the name. The name comes first. It always has. Everyone nodded like scripture had been quoted. My mother refilled glasses and whispered, "Let's not make the meal about all that," which is what she always says whenever something true threatens to surface. I felt the familiar urge to shrink, to laugh along, to make myself smaller so the evening could stay pleasant. 17 years I'd been doing that from a distance. 17 years of being the quiet room where nobody had to hear the hard things. I looked at my glass. I looked at my mother, poised and luminous, Prosecco lifted halfway to the ceiling. And for the first time in a very long time, I did not shrink. I just set my drink down on the tablecloth gently, the way you set down something you're finally finished carrying. "Don't worry about me," I said. My voice came out steady, almost kind. I've been married for a long time. The table didn't so much fall silent as become vacuum sealed. You have to understand, I know silence professionally. I can distinguish between a room that's merely empty and a room that's holding its breath. This was the second kind. My mother's Prosecco glass stopped in the air, tilted mid-toast, the light still catching the rim. Her smile stayed on her face a half-second too long. The way a photograph keeps smiling after the moment has passed. Brooke's fork clattered against her plate.
"You're what?" she said.
Married. I folded my hands. 7 years, actually. My father's eyebrows climbed toward a hairline that had been retreating for a decade. 7 years, he repeated slowly, like a number that wouldn't calculate no matter how he arranged it. You've been married 7 years, and you never told your family? And there it was, before the plates were even cleared, the pivot. Not "are you happy?" Not "who is he?" But "how could you keep this from us?" As if the keeping were the crime. My mother finally lowered her glass without drinking. Her hand was not quite steady. "Eleanor," she said, and her voice had gone thin, "why would you hide that?" I looked at all of them. These people who had spent a decade turning my life into a punchline they served at dinner. And I thought about how to explain that you don't hand your happiness to someone who's demonstrated exactly what they do with the things you love. But I didn't say that. Not yet. I just said, because I wanted one thing that was only mine. The questions came all at once, the way they do when people are less curious than caught off guard. What's his name? What does he do? Why isn't he here? Is he ashamed of us? That last one was Brooke, and she meant it to wound, and it would have once. I gave them almost nothing. His name is Marcus. He's traveling on business. No, he isn't ashamed. Yes, it's real. There are rings and a lease and a life. I kept my answers brief. Not out of cruelty, but out of instinct, the same instinct that makes you cup your hand around a candle flame in the wind. My father leaned back and studied me with a new expression, one I couldn't read yet, one that would make terrible sense later. "Well," he said, full of surprises. My mother reached over and touched my wrist. And for one dangerous second, I almost softened, almost let the warmth in. "We just want to be part of your life, sweetheart," she said. And I wanted to believe her so desperately it frightened me. But I had not flown in from Chicago and rented a car at Bradley Airport to be part of anyone's life. I had come for a document. And sitting there with my mother's hand on my wrist and my sister's laughter still hanging in the air like smoke, I understood something clean and cold. They thought tonight's surprise was the biggest one in the room. It wasn't. The biggest surprise was in a manila folder in a filing cabinet 10 feet away with my name forged at the bottom. And I was the only person at that table who knew it was there. The quietest room in the house is the one where you finally stop lying. Let me take you back 12 years because you can't understand the folder without understanding the panel. When I was 24, Vance Acoustics was 4 months from bankruptcy. I'd already left home at 19. Left the noise. Left the smallness. But I still came back on weekends then. Still believed a family was something you could repair with enough of your own effort. The firm made standard acoustic panels, the gray kind you've seen in 1,000 office ceilings, and nobody was buying them anymore. So I sat in the back workshop for an entire winter and designed something new. A layered sound dampening core tuned so a room could stay warm without going muddy. A panel that didn't just kill sound, but shaped it. I built the first one myself. I signed the inside of the frame where nobody would ever look. The way a luthier signs the belly of a violin. My initials, and a line I believed in. That panel saved the company. The orders came back. The Vance name stayed on the building for another decade because of a design a 24-year-old woman built in the cold. And then slowly, the way these things happen, the story got retold without me in it. It became the Vance panel. It became Dad's legacy. I let it. I told myself credit didn't matter. That I had my own work now, my own city, my own quiet. I told myself letting them have it was a kind of love. That was the lie I'd been living inside, smooth as a sealed room. And now that same panel, my panel, was the crown jewel of a deal worth more money than my father had ever seen. And somewhere in a folder, my name was pretending to have agreed to give it all away. The next morning, I drove out to the firm. I told everyone I just wanted to see the old place decorated for the holidays. That part was even a little true. Vance Acoustics looked prosperous in a way it never had when I was growing up. Fresh paint, a glass conference room, a brass plaque by the door with the founding year and my father's name embossed like a coat of arms. There were visitors, men in expensive coats, a woman with a leather portfolio, the unmistakable careful politeness of people deciding whether to spend a great deal of money. My father was in his element, walking them past the display wall, his voice carrying. "Everything you see, we own outright," he was saying. "Every patent, every design, all of it assigned to the company, clean as a whistle, signed and sealed years ago. We keep it in the family." The buyers nodded. The woman wrote something down, and I stood by a rack of holiday cards, feeling the floor tilt very slightly under me because I knew that at least one of those signatures had never been given. If you've ever walked back into a house that shrank you the moment you crossed the threshold, you already know the sound. A room full of confident talk you're not part of about a thing you made. Stay with me. It gets quieter before it gets loud. Some families don't want you to succeed. They want you to stay small enough to manage. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. I watched my father shake a buyer's hand. I watched him say the word clean again. And I decided, standing there with a snowflake melting on my sleeve, that I was going to read that document before I let anyone sell my name. I asked casually if I could look at the intellectual property paperwork. I framed it as professional curiosity, one designer admiring how a clean assignment gets structured, nothing more. Brooke intercepted me before the sentence was fully out of my mouth. She'd always had good instincts for exactly the wrong moment. "Why would you need to see that?" she said, arms folded, smile bright and hard. "You don't really work here, Eleanor. You haven't in years. It's kind of not your business anymore." I said I was only interested. She tilted her head. "See, this is the thing about you." Her voice climbed just enough for the room to catch it. "You disappear for 17 years. You show up with a secret husband, and now you want to poke around the deal that's going to set this whole family up for life. People might think you're jealous." She laughed, light, performing for the 2 employees within earshot. My mother, passing with a tray of cookies for the guests, caught the tail end of it and said without even slowing down, "Oh, she's just teasing. Eleanor, don't make that face." There it was again. The little phrase that turns every knife into a joke and every joke into your fault. "She's just teasing." I'd heard it my whole life. It's a spell, that sentence. It erases things. It had erased my hurt for 36 years, and it was about to be asked to erase a felony. But I smiled and I let it go. And I said something about needing air, because I had realized that asking permission was a mistake. You don't ask the people who forged your name whether you may see the forgery. So I stopped asking and I started looking on my own. Walter found me by the loading dock, hands in his coveralls, breath fogging in the cold. "You didn't hear it from me," he said, and led me to a side office where a due diligence binder sat out on the table, tabbed and photocopied for the buyers to review. "Nobody's in the room." He stood in the doorway watching the hallway while I turned to the tab marked Intellectual Property Assignments. And there it was. A one-page assignment agreement transferring all rights, title, and interest in the chambered dampening design from the inventor to Vance Acoustics Incorporated. Dated 6 years ago, signed on the line that said, "Inventor, Eleanor Vance." My whole body went still in the particular way it does when your professional brain takes over, because the rest of you can't. I looked at the signature. I have signed my name perhaps 100,000 times. I know its rhythm the way you know your own heartbeat. This was not it.
Close.
Someone had tried. Someone had a sample to copy from. But the E was wrong, too angular. And the tail of the final E crossed the wrong direction. The whole thing sat too neatly on the line without the slight downward drift my hand has made since 3rd grade. Somebody had practiced. Somebody had sat down with an example of how I write my name and rehearsed it until it was good enough to fool a stranger. Not good enough to fool me. I stood in that borrowed office with the December light coming gray through the blinds, and I felt something I had spent 17 years refusing to feel about these people. Not sadness, not even anger, not yet. Just a cold, clean certainty. Someone in my own family had sat down and learned to be me. I did what I always do when the ground moves. I gathered data. I photographed the page, both sides in good light, the way you're supposed to. Then I checked the date against my own life, because a signature is a claim about where a person was, and where a person was can sometimes be proven. 6 years ago, the date on the assignment was in May. And, in that May, I had not been in Connecticut or anywhere near it. I'd been in Stockholm giving a paper at an international acoustics conference, my name in a printed program, my face in a group photo on a stage, my passport stamped, my hotel invoice charged to my own account. I remembered it because it had snowed the entire week, and I'd given the talk of my life to a room that finally understood what I did. On the day this document claimed I sat in Hartford and signed away the best thing I ever made, I was 4,000 miles away in the snow being taken seriously. This was not a filing error. Nobody accidentally forges a signature onto a page. Nobody accidentally invents a date. This was a decision made by a person with a pen who chose to put my name where my consent should have been because it was easier than asking me, or because they already knew what I'd say. I closed the binder exactly the way I'd found it. I thanked Walter with my eyes, not my mouth, because his job was in that building. And I walked back out into the lobby where my father was laughing with the buyers. And I smiled at him and I thought, I know now. I know. And you don't know that I know. And I let myself have that just for a day, like a coal in a cold pocket. That evening, I helped my mother in the kitchen because I needed to know how deep it went. And my mother has never in her life been able to hold a thing she thinks is nice. I dried while she washed. I kept my voice at the temperature of small talk. It's funny, I said. I don't even remember signing anything over to the company back when. Her hands slowed in the suds. Oh, sweetheart, you didn't have to worry about all that, she said, warm, reassuring, the way you'd comfort a child about a nightmare. Your father took care of the paperwork for you. You were always so busy with your rooms. He said, why make a fuss over forms when it all stays in the family anyway? He handled it. He handles everything. She smiled at me, proud of him, proud of the arrangement, entirely unaware that she had just confirmed it. My father had signed my name. My mother knew in the soft way she knows everything and questions nothing, and to her it wasn't a crime. It was a courtesy, a man taking a burden off his daughter's shoulders. The name comes first, she added, drying her hands, echoing him without knowing she was quoting anything at all. You know how he is. I didn't know how he was. I was just beginning to understand how much I'd been letting that stand in for how he was allowed to be. I finished drying the last plate and set it in the rack and asked as lightly as I could whether Dad was still up because there was no point circling it anymore. If my father had done this thing and believed it was love, then I needed to hear him say so to my face with no buyers watching. I found him in his study with a whiskey and the ledger he still keeps by hand. I shut the door. I didn't raise my voice. I've learned that the calmest voice in the room is the one people finally hear. Dad, I said, there's an assignment in the buyer's binder with my signature on it. I never signed it. You did. He didn't flinch. He didn't even pretend to be confused. He looked up at me with something that was almost pride and said, so you found it. Like I'd solved a puzzle he'd left for me. You made that panel under this roof, Eleanor. You were a Vance using Vance tools in a Vance building. That design was always ours. All I did was finish the paperwork you were too busy to do. That's not stealing. That's a father cleaning up after his kid. Same as I've always done. I said quietly, forging a signature is a crime. He waved the whiskey. Family isn't a crime. You want to know a crime? Walking out and letting the company that raised you go under. And then for just a moment, the armor slipped and I saw the wound underneath. My father did the same to me, he said, staring at the ledger. First panel line I ever drew. He put the company's name on it, and mine nowhere. I cried about it for a year. Then I understood. That's how a family survives. You feed the name, and the name feeds you. He looked up. I did you a kindness. Someday you'll see it. He believed every word. That was the worst part. He wasn't a villain twirling a mustache. He was a man who'd been robbed young and had decided the theft was a tradition worth passing down. I told him I wanted my name off the deal. I told him the assignment was void because I never gave it. That's just the law, I said. Not a threat. That's when the warmth drained out of the room. My father is never colder than the moment you stop being useful to the story he's telling. Off the deal, he repeated. Eleanor, do you have any idea what closes next week? Do you understand how many people's jobs are riding on that panel line? Walter, the whole floor. Your mother's retirement is in this company. He stood up. If you blow this up now over a signature, over your pride, that's not me destroying this family. That's you. Everyone will know it was you. And there it was. The oldest tool in the house, sliding into my hands whether I wanted it or not. The responsibility. Make yourself small so the room can stay smooth. Carry the thing no one else will carry. Be the good daughter, the strong one, the one who sacrifices. I felt the pull of it in my chest like gravity because I have always been the one who absorbs the cost so nobody else has to. That's my wound, if you want to call it that. Not that I trust too easily. I trust almost no one. It's that I've believed my whole life that love means being the person who disappears so everyone else can stay comfortable. And standing in my father's study, watching him hand me the blame for a crime he committed, I finally saw the shape of the machine I'd been feeding. It ran on me. It had always run on me. It was running on me right now, and it was counting on the fact that I would rather burn quietly than let anyone else feel the heat. I didn't answer him. I walked out of the study through the dark house, and I drove to the firm one more time that night. I had a key from Walter, and I told the night guard I'd left a scarf. What I really wanted was to stand in front of the wall, because in the lobby, mounted under a spotlight, framed like art, hangs the very first one, panel 001, the original, the one I built by hand in a cold workshop when I was 24. There's a little brass card beside it now that reads, "The Vance Panel," the design that built our future, with the company logo and my father's name as founder. My name is nowhere on the card. I stood there a long time. Then I did the thing I'd come to do. I lifted the frame off its bracket carefully. It's heavier than it looks, and I turned it over, and I looked at the back of the panels where no buyer ever looks, where no plaque ever reaches. And there, in the pale wood of the inner frame, in the small block letters of a 24-year-old who thought she was signing something only she would ever see, it still said what I'd written 12 years ago. Evie. And beneath it, the line I'd believed in. The room where you can finally hear yourself think. I ran my thumb over the letters. They were mine. They had always been mine. The front of the panel belonged to the family, to the name, to the deal, to the story they told buyers in expensive coats. But the back of it, the part that held everything up, the part that did the actual work of shaping the silence, that was me. Hidden. Load-bearing. Uncredited. Exactly like the daughter. And I stood there in the dark lobby, and I said it out loud to no one, quiet as a closed room. Forgiveness isn't a signature. I sat in the rental car in the empty lot with my phone in my hand and my husband's name on the screen. And I want to be honest with you about what I almost did. Marcus is an investor. That's the plain word for it. He's a partner at a fund. He moves money, and he moves the people who move money. And in the world where this deal was closing, he is not a small man. One phone call. That's all it would have taken. He could have made a quiet inquiry, leaned on the right relationship, and this entire deal could have simply evaporated before anyone signed a thing. Or he could have swept in and funded the company himself and bought my family's gratitude for the rest of their lives. I could have made all of this disappear. Or I could have made myself the hero who saved them. And either way, I'd have walked back into that house holding the one card that would finally make them see me. I sat there with my thumb over his name for a long time. I want you to remember that I could have, because what I did instead is the whole point of this story. If a boundary ever cost you something real, you already know exactly where I was sitting in a cold car deciding whether to win the wrong way. Hit subscribe and stay with me because this is the part one got right. I didn't call to ask him to fix it. I put the phone in the cup holder because using Marcus to erase this, whether by killing the deal or by rescuing it, would have made me exactly what my father was, someone who solves a problem of truth by burying it under power. And I did not fly home to become my father. I flew home to stop being his tradition. The next morning, before I decided anything final, I called someone who owed me nothing and would tell me the truth. An intellectual property attorney in Chicago I'd worked with on a licensing matter years back. I laid it out plainly. A design I created, an assignment I never signed, my father's name on the pen instead of mine, a sale about to close on the strength of that page. She listened, and then she gave it to me straight, the way good lawyers do. Eleanor, if you didn't sign it, that assignment is void. Not weak, void. A forged signature transfers nothing, which means legally you never gave up that design. You still own it. I asked what that meant for the deal. It means the company doesn't have clean title to the thing they're selling. When the buyer's people do their diligence and ask the inventor to confirm the chain of title, and they will ask, you'd have to either ratify it or tell the truth. If you tell the truth, they can't close. Not the way it's papered now. And the forgery itself, she paused, that's a criminal matter in Connecticut. But that part isn't yours to prosecute or forgive. That part just is. I thanked her and hung up and sat with it. Here was the thing that changed everything. The power in this room had never been my husband's money or my family's name. The power was a single signature I had not given and would not give. Not a weapon I had to go find. A weapon that was simply the truth of where I'd been and what I'd never agreed to. All I had to do to bring the whole clean as a whistle story down was refuse to lie. The quietest possible act, and the most expensive one. They could tell something had shifted. Families like mine have antennae for the exact moment the quiet one stops being quiet. My mother started hovering, refilling my coffee before it was empty, asking if I was sleeping all right, if the marriage was all right, if I was all right. Each question a small hand, testing a door. That afternoon, she sat beside me on the porch and took my hand and said the thing she'd clearly been sent to say. Whatever you and your father are tangled up about, she said, please, sweetheart, let's keep it in the family. We don't air these things. We don't let strangers into our business. That's how we've always survived. Keep it in the family. It's the grown-up version of she's just teasing. Same spell, bigger stakes. The words we use to make sure the truth never gets past the front door.